Healing is not always loud. It does not always announce itself. It does not always arrive in a moment of clarity, or a surge of emotion, or a conversation that changes everything. Most healing happens quietly, in the background, in the spaces between the things you can name, in sleep, in stillness, in the moments when you are not trying to heal at all. The ancient Buddhist teachers understood this in a way that most modern approaches to wellness have forgotten. They didn't offer remedies. They didn't prescribe practices for specific problems. They told stories. Stories that entered the listener sideways, that approached the wound from an angle the defenses couldn't anticipate. That did their work not in spite of the listeners not trying, but because of it. Healing, they understood, is the natural direction of living things when they are given what they need. Give a broken bone stillness and time, and it heals. Not because the bone is trying to heal, because healing is what bones do when conditions allow. Give a troubled mind genuine rest, and something moves back toward its natural state. Not because the mind is working on itself, because returning to wholeness is what minds do when they are no longer required to manage everything. What this hour offers is conditions, stillness, time, stories that work beneath the surface of trying, the specific quality of darkness and quiet that the body recognizes as permission to do what it has always known how to do. You don't need to try to heal tonight. You only need to receive what is here. The stories will do what stories do. The dark will do what the dark does. The body, given space and quiet and the company of these ancient words, will do what it has always done when conditions allow. Let the conditions be present tonight. Let the healing happen the way bones heal and seeds grow and rivers find their level. By itself, in the dark, while you rest. Story 1. The monk who carried water for the sick. In a mountain monastery, there was a monk whose assigned work was simple. He carried water, not for the kitchen, not for the gardens, for the sick. The monastery had a small infirmary at one end of the compound, and each morning and each evening, this monk made the journey from the well to the infirmary, carrying 2 heavy buckets on a pole across his shoulders. He had been doing this for 20 years. Other monks had more visible roles: teaching, leading ceremonies, copying texts, advising visitors. His role was invisible in the way that all essential things are invisible until they are absent. A young scholar who was visiting the monastery to study under the abbot watched the monk make his journey one morning and found himself moved by something he couldn't immediately name. There was a quality to the carrying that he had not expected. Not the stoic resignation of someone performing a duty they find beneath them. Not the ostentatious peace of someone performing holiness. Something more ordinary than either and somehow more impressive. The monk was simply present in the carrying, in each step, in the weight on the pole, and the slight adjustment of balance, and the awareness of the water in the buckets. Later, the scholar found him resting and asked what he found meaningful in such repetitive work. The monk looked at him with an expression that was neither defensive nor surprised. When someone is sick, he said, and they are hot with fever, the cold water I bring is the most real thing in the world to them. More real than philosophy. More real than teaching. More real than anything I might say about the nature of mind or the path to liberation. He paused. The water arrives. The fever is a little less. For a moment, there is relief. And in that moment of relief, that small, physical, utterly ordinary moment, something is present that I have never found in the meditation hall. What? Asked the scholar. Gratitude, said the monk. Pure, uncomplicated gratitude for what simply is. Not for the teaching, not for the understanding, for the water, for the coldness of it, for the fact that it arrived. He looked at the scholar. I carry water because being present when someone is given relief, even small relief, even temporary relief, is the closest I have found to what all the teachings are pointing at. The scholar went away thinking about this for days, and found himself, in the weeks that followed, more attentive to the small moments of relief in his own life. The cool water on a hot afternoon, the first breath after a long exhale, the moment of stillness between one thought and the next. The ordinary miracles, available always, noticed rarely. There are small moments of relief available right now. The coolness of the air moving through the room, or the warmth of the blanket if you are covered, the particular contact of your body with what holds it. Pressure distributed across a surface, not random but specific. The specific shape of you meeting the specific shape of what supports you. The breath arriving. These are the water the monk carried. Not enlightenment, not peace in its highest and most complete form, but relief, small, real, immediately available, requiring nothing except attention. Be grateful for them, not as a practice, as a recognition. They are here. You are here. For this moment, there is relief. It is enough. Story. The healer who did not heal. In a village between two mountains, there was a woman who the villagers came to when they were sick. She was not a physician in any formal sense. She had no training, no title, no medicines of the kind that physicians dispensed. What she had was time and attention, and a quality of presence that the sick, who had experienced both its absence and its presence, found more valuable than most of what the trained physicians offered. She would sit with the sick. That was all, most of the time. She would come when called and sit beside the bed and be there, not waiting for the person to improve, not monitoring for signs of change, not doing the subtle performance of concern that well-meaning visitors often produced, simply sitting, as present with the person's pain as she was with anything else. Not flinching from it, not rushing past it, not trying to turn it into something more acceptable. People who had been through serious illness often said afterward that her presence had been more healing than the medicines. When pressed to explain what she did, she found it difficult to say. I don't do anything, she would say. That's the thing I find hardest to explain. I don't try to make them better. I don't try to make them feel better. I don't try to take the pain away. Then what do you do? People would ask. I let the pain be real, she said. I let it be what it is. I don't argue with it. I don't suggest it's smaller than it feels, or that it will certainly pass, or that there is a lesson in it. I simply am there, with them, in it. She paused. I think that what heals in those cases is not me. It is the experience of not being alone in the pain, of having someone present who doesn't need them to be other than they are, who isn't frightened by the pain or impatient with it or trying to fix it. who is simply there. And that heals? Someone asked. That changes the relationship to the pain, she said carefully. Which, in my experience, is as close to healing as most pain ever gets. The pain may remain, but the aloneness in it, the sense that you are carrying something that no one else can understand or witness or share, that can change. And when that changes, the pain becomes more bearable. Sometimes dramatically more bearable. Why? They asked. She thought about this for a long time. Because the worst part of suffering, she said finally, is usually not the suffering itself. It is the silence around it. The sense that you are in a country no one else has ever visited. The presence of someone who has also been in that country, or who is willing to go there with you, even for an hour, changes everything. She looked at whoever was asking. I am willing to go there. That is all I bring. And it turns out to be, for many people, the thing they most needed. You are not alone in whatever you are carrying tonight, not because this voice is company in the way that a person in the room would be company, but because these words come from a tradition of people who knew this country, who had been in it themselves, who had sat with others in it, who had found, over centuries of practice, that the silence around suffering was often the hardest part. These words are willing to go there with you. Whatever is present tonight, the physical discomfort, the emotional weight, the quiet grief of things lost or not yet found, the low-grade anxiety that doesn't always have a name, these words will sit with it, not to fix it, not to tell you it will certainly pass, not to suggest it's smaller than it feels, simply to be here with you in it. You are not alone. Pain, whatever it is, has been witnessed. And in the witnessing, something that is not the end of pain, but is adjacent to it, is close enough to be felt alongside it. Something that is peace. Story 3. The bowl that broke and was mended. A potter who had spent her life making bowls had one bowl that she valued above all the others. Not because it was the most technically perfect. She could point to others in her studio that were more precise in their proportions, more even in their walls, more consistent in their glaze. But this bowl had something those others didn't, something she found difficult to name, that made it the one she reached for when she wanted tea, the one she used for the food she was most grateful to be eating. One afternoon, she knocked it from the shelf. It fell and broke, not shattered. 2 large pieces and several small ones. The kind of break that is irrecoverable in the sense that the bowl will never be what it was, and recoverable in the sense that the pieces can be gathered and something can be made of them. She gathered the pieces, and then she used a technique she had learned years ago from a Japanese tradition called Kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, not hiding the break, not restoring the bowl to a state in which the break was invisible, but marking the break, filling the cracks with gold lacquer so that the lines of breakage became lines of gold, so that the history of the bowl's breaking became part of its appearance, so that anyone who picked it up could see immediately. This bowl was broken, and the breaking is part of what it now is. When she finished, she set the bowl on the shelf and looked at it for a long time. It was, she found, more beautiful than it had been before. Not despite the gold lines, because of them. Because the lines told a true story. because they made visible something that all things carry, the history of their damage, the evidence of their breaking, the proof that they had been through something and remained. She used the bowl for the rest of her life, and when people asked about the gold lines, she told them what had happened, and many of them found, in the telling, something they hadn't expected to find. Not comfort, exactly. Recognition. The recognition that this is what we all are. Things that have been broken, repaired with whatever gold we had available, carrying the visible lines of our history, more beautiful for it in a way that is difficult to explain and immediately recognizable to anyone who has ever been broken and continued. You carry gold lines. You may not think of them that way. You may think of them as damage, as evidence of weakness, as the places where you failed to remain whole. But the Kintsugi bowl is more beautiful than the unbroken one. Not because breakage is good, because the repair is evidence of something that matters more than perfection. Survival, continuation, the willingness to gather the pieces and make something of them. You have done that. You are doing it. The gold lines are not shame. They are the proof that you have been through something and that you are still here, still carrying water, still making bowls, still moving through the night toward the morning with all your breaks and all your gold intact. Rest now. The bowl is complete, exactly as it is. Story 4. The tree that bent in the storm. A young monk, newly arrived at a forest monastery, was frightened by his first major storm. The monastery sat in a clearing surrounded by very tall trees that had been growing for 100 years or more, and that towered over the buildings. When the storm came, these trees moved in ways the young monk had not anticipated. They bent dramatically, their tops sweeping wide arcs across the sky, their trunks flexing in ways that seemed to threaten the fundamental integrity of the tree. He expected them to break. He expected, in the morning, to find the grounds littered with fallen giants. In the morning, the trees were standing, every one of them. He went to an older monk who had been at the monastery for 30 years and told her what he had observed. I expected them to break, he said. They bent so far. How did they survive? The older monk looked at the trees with the affection of someone who had watched them for decades. The bending is why they survive, she said. Not despite the bending, because of it. She moved to one of the great trees and placed her hand on its bark. A rigid tree breaks, she said. It cannot distribute the force of the wind through movement, so the force concentrates at a single point until the wood fails there. A tree that bends takes the force and distributes it through the trunk, through the branches, through the whole system of the tree, so that no single point bears more than it can hold. She looked at the young monk. The roots hold, she said. That is the requirement. The roots must be deep enough and wide enough that the bending does not become uprooting. If the roots hold, the tree can bend as far as it needs to and return. The young monk looked up at the canopy, which was moving gently now in the after-storm breeze, still flexible, still in motion. And the bending doesn't damage them? He asked. Some, said the older monk. The storm is not nothing. There is wear. There are smaller branches lost. But the bending itself, the movement, the distribution of force, the willingness to be moved, that is not damage. That is survival. She paused. We try to be rigid, she said. We think that being unmoved means being strong. But the tree knows better. The tree bends completely as far as the storm demands and returns. Not because it is weak, because its roots are deep enough that it can afford to bend. What are your roots? Not metaphorically, or not only metaphorically. What are the things that are so deep, so established, so thoroughly part of what you are, that they allow the rest of you to bend without breaking? For different people, these are different things. For some, it is faith of one kind or another. For some, it is love. The specific, rooted, surviving love that exists between people who have been through things together. For some, it is the practice itself. The years of sitting, of returning, of finding that the ground is there even after the worst storms. You have roots. You have survived storms that bent you further than you thought possible, and you are here, not unaffected. Some smaller branches lost, somewhere, but here, the roots held. Tonight, in this stillness, feel the roots. Not the storm, the roots. The things that held. The things that are holding right now, beneath the surface, beneath the bending, doing their deep work in the dark, the way roots always do their deep work in the dark. You are held by what has always held you. Rest in the roots tonight. Let the branches be still. Story 5. The woman who stopped running. She had been running for most of her adult life. Not literally, though she was also a runner in the physical sense, which she recognized now as connected. She had been running from something, towards something, between things, through things. She had never been entirely still. The stillness frightened her. She knew this about herself, but had never stopped long enough to examine why. There was always a reason to keep moving. A project, a relationship, a city, a version of herself she was trying to become or escape. The motion was familiar. The motion felt like progress. Then something happened that made stopping unavoidable. Not a catastrophe, a quieter thing. A period of exhaustion so complete that even the familiar forward lean of her body felt like more than she could maintain. The engine ran out of fuel, not dramatically, but fully, and she found herself stopped for the first time in she couldn't remember, with nowhere to go and no energy to go there. She expected the stillness to be unbearable. She had been avoiding it for so long that she had come to believe it would be. What she found instead surprised her. The stillness was quiet, not empty, quiet, full of things she had been moving too fast to notice. The quality of light in the particular place she had stopped, the sound of the street below, which had been there every day, and which she was hearing, really hearing, for perhaps the first time, the specific texture of the chair she was sitting in, which she had owned for years and never actually felt. And beneath all of that, something she recognized dimly from a time before the running had begun, a quality of being simply here, without agenda, without destination, without the performance of forward motion. She had been here before, a long time ago, as a child, before she had learned that stillness was something to be afraid of, before someone, she couldn't remember who, had communicated in ways that didn't use words, that being still was being unproductive, that being unproductive was being worth less, that being worth less was a danger to be avoided at all costs. The running had begun as a response to that message. And now, in the exhausted stillness, the message was examined for the first time. She found that it wasn't true, that the stillness was not emptiness, or failure, or worthlessness, that the stillness was, in fact, the thing she had been running toward all along, imagining it as a destination that would be reached when enough had been accomplished, when enough had been proven, when the running had covered sufficient ground. But it was here. It had always been here, waiting, patient as a field in winter, for the running to end. The stillness is not something you arrive at after enough effort. The stillness is what is already here when the effort stops. It has been here this whole time, beneath the running, beneath the leaning forward, beneath the continuous motion of a life that had learned that motion was safety. You can stop now, not permanently. The running will resume, the motion will return, the days will continue to ask things of you. But tonight, the running stops, and the stillness that was always here, that has been here beneath every step, beneath every year of forward motion, is available simply by stopping, which you are doing. Right now, the stillness is here. You have arrived, not because you covered enough ground, because you stopped. Story: the master and the bitter medicine. A monk who had been ill for a long time was given medicine that was very bitter. Not unpleasantly bitter in the way of coffee or dark chocolate. Genuinely, almost unbearably bitter. The kind of bitterness that triggers the body's resistance before the mind has a chance to evaluate. He struggled with it. He could take it. He was not so ill or so weak that swallowing was difficult. But the resistance was real. Every time the cup was brought to him, something in him pulled back. He developed small strategies for managing the bitterness, holding his breath, swallowing quickly, chasing it with something pleasant. But the resistance remained. He brought this one afternoon when the teacher visited the infirmary to the master. "I am having trouble with the medicine," he said. "Not the taking of it, the resistance to it. The way something in me pulls back every time." The master sat beside the bed and looked at him with genuine interest. "What does the bitterness feel like?" he asked. The monk described it. The sharpness of it on the tongue, the way it spread through the mouth, the almost gagging quality of it, the way the throat wanted to close. "And when you resist," the master said, "does the medicine become less bitter?" "No." "Does the resistance make the taking easier?" "No. It makes it harder. The fighting makes it worse." "So, the resistance," the master said, "serves no function except to add suffering to what is already unpleasant." The monk saw this clearly. "Yes," he said. "Then try something," said the master. "The next time the medicine comes, take it without the resistance. Not by pretending it isn't bitter. It is, and you know it. And pretending otherwise is another form of resistance. But take it fully. Let the bitterness be completely what it is. Open to it. Let your mouth know exactly how bitter it is, without the body pulling back, without the mind recoiling." "That sounds terrible," said the monk. "Try it," said the master, "and tell me what you find." When the medicine came, the monk tried. It was difficult. The instinct to pull back was strong, but he practiced meeting it. The full bitterness, the full sharpness, the complete experience of this unpleasant thing being completely itself in his mouth. And he found, surprisingly, uncomfortably, undeniably, that the medicine, met fully and without resistance, was less terrible than the medicine met with resistance and struggle. Not pleasant, still bitter, still unpleasant, but somehow more manageable. As if the resistance had been taking up space that the experience itself didn't actually need. As if the suffering had been doubled by the fight against it, and halved when the fight stopped. He told the master. The master nodded. The medicine is the medicine, he said. Bitter or not, it does its work. The only thing in your power is whether you add the suffering of resistance to the suffering of the bitterness. And this, he paused, applies to much more than medicine. What is the bitter medicine in your life right now? Not the large things necessarily. The large things have their own time and their own process. But the small, persistent bitterness, the thing that keeps coming back, the thing that you have been adding the second suffering to, the resistance, the fight, the recoiling, on top of whatever the thing itself carries. You can meet it differently tonight, not by pretending it isn't what it is, but by letting it be completely what it is, without the addition of the resistance. The bitterness is the bitterness. The resistance is optional. And without the resistance, however unpleasant the thing remains, there is space, a kind of breathing room around the experience that the resistance was filling. In that space, healing happens. Not because the bitterness went away, because the space itself is where living things return to their natural state. Open now. Let it be what it is, and rest in the space the opening creates. Story. The monastery by the river. There was a monastery that flooded, not dramatically. The river that ran beside it rose gradually each spring, as rivers in that region did, and some years it rose further than others. In the year of the great flood, it rose far enough to fill the lower level of the main building, ruining many of the stored food supplies and a significant portion of the library. The monks worked hard to save what could be saved. They moved things to higher ground. They sandbagged the doors. They worked through wet nights carrying what mattered up the stairs. And when the water came anyway, they stood in it and continued to move things until the things worth moving had been moved. Afterward, when the waters receded and the damage was visible and the work of repair was beginning, a visiting teacher who had been there through the flood asked the abbot what he had felt during it. The abbot thought for a moment. During the work, very little, he said. The work was clear, and there was too much of it to feel much. You carry what can be carried. You protect what can be protected. You let go of what cannot be saved. And now? The teacher asked. Now that the work is done and the loss is visible? The abbot looked at the damaged lower level, where the waterline was still visible on the walls, where the warped floors were beginning to be replaced. Grief, he said, simply and without drama. Some of what was lost cannot be replaced. The texts we lost, some of those cannot be recovered. That is a real loss, and I feel it as real. And, the teacher pressed gently, is there anything else? The abbot considered. Clarity, he said finally. The flood clarified what was essential. When you are carrying things to safety, you very quickly determine what actually matters. What you will carry when you can only carry so much. He paused. We had a great deal in that lower level that we had been keeping without examining whether keeping it was necessary. The flood made that examination for us. So, there is something that the flood gave? I would not say it was worth it, the abbot said carefully. The loss is real, and I would not pretend otherwise. But yes, in the rubble, as in most rubble, there is something that was there before the flood, and that the flood made visible, a clearer sense of what this community is, and what it values, and what it can, if necessary, release. He looked at the teacher. Floods reveal the riverbed, he said. That is all floods do. They take away what was covering it, and the riverbed, exposed, is exactly what it always was, just no longer hidden. Your floods have revealed something. The things you have lost, the things that have been taken, or have gone, or have changed in ways you didn't choose. They have revealed, in the going, what they were covering. What is the riverbed of your life? The things that remain after everything that can be lost has been lost. The love that is still present. The capacity that is still yours. The knowledge of yourself that the flood made visible by removing what obscured it. Rest with the riverbed tonight, not with the flood, not with the loss, with what the loss revealed, which was always there, always yours, unchangeable by any water. Story. The physician of the mind. There was a woman who came from a long line of physicians. Her grandmother had been a physician, her mother, and she had become one too, though in a slightly different way. She treated not the body, but the mind, which in the tradition she had studied was considered the more fundamental of the two, and the one most in need of careful tending. She had a practice that she developed over years that she sometimes shared with her students. Before you can treat a patient, she would say, you must understand what health looks like for that person. Not health in the abstract. Health for them, in their specific life, with their specific body and history and circumstances. This seems obvious, the students would say. It does, she would agree. And yet, almost all suffering comes from comparing one's actual state to an idea of health that has nothing to do with one's actual nature, from the belief that health looks like calm, when for this person health is lively, from the belief that health looks like achievement, when for this person health is belonging, from the belief that health looks like what it looks like for someone else. So, the first treatment, she would say, is always the same. It is asking the patient, what were you like when you felt most yourself? Not most productive, not most admired, most yourself. And then, she would say, the rest of the treatment is simply, how do we move closer to that? She had found, over years of practice, that the answer to that question was almost never what the patient expected. It was almost never more discipline, or more achievement, or more management of the self. It was almost always something that had been given up along the way. Some quality of ease or playfulness or presence that had been considered unnecessary, impractical, a luxury that couldn't be afforded while there were important things to accomplish. And the returning to it, the simple, sometimes difficult, always worthwhile returning to what had been given up, was the medicine, not a cure. Health isn't a destination, but the direction, the orientation back toward what the person actually was, underneath everything they had learned to perform. When were you most yourself? Not most impressive, not most successful, not most at peace in any abstract sense. Most yourself. Find that person. The specific quality of ease or aliveness or presence that existed in that version, even if briefly, even if long ago, even if only in glimpses. That is the direction of your healing. Not toward some ideal, toward the specific, particular self that is actually yours. Tonight, in this stillness, that self is closer than it has been all day. The day asks for performance. The night asks for nothing. And in the asking for nothing, the self that has been performing all day can briefly set down the performance. And what is there underneath is not emptiness. It is you, resting, being what you actually are when nothing else is required. Rest there. Stay as long as the night allows. Story. The gift of the ordinary morning. There was a monk who had experienced, in the middle of his practice, something that he could only describe as an opening, a moment in which the ordinary world, the courtyard of the monastery, the sound of birds, the quality of morning light on stone, became, without anything changing, completely extraordinary, not dramatic, not visionary, simply there in a way that it had never been there before, or that he had never been present enough to receive. It lasted, he said, for approximately 20 minutes, and then it passed, and the world went back to being ordinary. The courtyard was the courtyard. The birds were birds. The light was light. He spent years trying to return to it, years of intensified practice, of changed routines, of consulting teachers and changing techniques, and doing everything he could think of to recreate the conditions for what had happened. It didn't come. Eventually, he gave up trying to recreate it. And in the giving up, in the release of the project of returning to that experience, something shifted. Not the return of the experience itself, but a different relationship to the ordinariness. He stopped experiencing the ordinary morning as the absence of the extraordinary morning. He started experiencing it as a morning. A specific, unrepeatable morning with its specific quality of light and sound and air. Not extraordinary in the way of that one opening, but not ordinary in the sense of less than either. Simply what it was. And in simply being what it was, he found something that the extraordinary morning had offered only briefly, and that the ordinary morning attended to fully, offered constantly. The sense of being here. Actually here. Not waiting for something more to arrive before being fully present. Here, in this morning, with this light, with these birds, in this courtyard, where there is nothing missing, where everything that is here is completely itself, where the present moment entered fully is not the extraordinary opening he had chased for years, but something better, perhaps, something reliable, something available every morning without condition. This ordinary night, not a special night, not a night when the extraordinary arrived, just a night, with its specific quality of dark and quiet, its specific temperature, its specific sounds or absence of them. This specific, ordinary, unrepeatable night. You are in it, actually in it, not waiting for it to become something more or different. Here, and here, in the full presence of this ordinary specific night, there is something that is neither extraordinary nor missing. There is simply this, which is, when you are fully in it, enough, which has always been enough, which was enough before you knew to call it anything. Rest in the ordinary extraordinary of this night. It will not come again. It is completely here right now. You are completely here. That is everything. Story 10. The final story. The healer's last teaching. There was a healer who was very old and who knew she was dying. She had spent her life in the work of healing, not the dramatic interventions that saved lives in moments of crisis, but the slower, quieter, more persistent work of helping people find their way back to themselves after illness or loss, or the ordinary accumulation of damage that a life in the world produces. Her students came to her in those last weeks to receive whatever final teaching she might offer. She was, by then, too weak for long conversations. One student asked, "Of everything you have learned, what is most important?" She was quiet for a moment. "The body wants to heal," she said. "This is the most important thing I know, more than any technique, any understanding, any practice. The body wants to heal. Not because healing is its purpose. I'm not sure living things have purposes in the way we imagine. But healing is the direction they move when conditions allow, like water finding its level, like a plant moving toward light. Not because it is trying to, because that is the nature of living things." She paused. "So the healer's work," she said, "is never to heal. It is to create conditions in which healing can happen. Stillness, warmth, the absence of what is preventing it, the presence of what is needed." "What is needed?" the student asked. "Different things for different people," she said. "But underneath the different things, the sense that it is safe to stop fighting, safe to let down the defenses, safe to release the vigilance that the pain or the fear or the accumulated damage has made feel necessary." She looked at the student. "Most suffering is partly the suffering itself, and partly the body's response to the suffering," she said. "The clenching against it, the armor, the vigilance, these are protective, and I am not saying they are wrong to have developed. But they become, over time, part of what needs healing, the healing of the suffering and the healing of the armor around the suffering." "And how does the armor heal?" the student asked. "By being told, very clearly, very gently, very persistently, that it is no longer needed, that the danger has passed, that the body can release it." She closed her eyes for a moment. "That is what the good healers do," she said softly. "They create a space safe enough that the armor begins to believe it is no longer needed, and when the armor lifts, even briefly, even partially, what is underneath is always the same thing." "What?" the student asked. "Life," she said. "The original, undefended, completely itself life, which knows how to heal, which has always known, which only needed the armor to lift long enough to do what it has always been trying to do." She didn't speak again that day, but the student sat with her in the quiet of the afternoon and felt, in the particular quality of that silence, in the presence of someone who had spent a lifetime creating the conditions for healing, something moving through them, not dramatically, quietly, the way healing always moves, in the background, in the stillness. While you are not watching, the armor can lift tonight. Whatever you have been protecting yourself with, the vigilance, the monitoring, the readiness that never fully goes off, it can rest now. The danger it was protecting against is not present in this moment. There is only this: the dark, the quiet, the breath, the body that wants, as all living things want, to return to its natural state, which is wholeness, which is health, which is the original, undefended life underneath everything that has been added to protect it. You don't need to make healing happen. You only need to let the armor rest. And what is underneath, what has always been underneath, will do what living things do when conditions allow. Find its way back to itself, to you, to the original wholeness that damage can obscure but cannot destroy. The healer is in you. The conditions are present. The armor can rest. Sleep now. Let the healing happen the way all healing happens. In the quiet, in the dark, while you rest. Good night. There is something the healer understood that the teachers before her had also understood, and that the teachers before them had also understood in an unbroken line stretching back further than any written record, that the body carries its history. Every experience you have had, every moment of pain, every moment of joy, every loss and every love, and every ordinary afternoon that seemed unremarkable while it was happening, all of it is somewhere in the body. Not as memory exactly, as texture, as the particular way the breath moves in your chest, as the places where you carry tension you didn't put there consciously, as the posture you developed in response to things that happened before you knew what to do with them. The body is a record, and the body, given conditions of genuine safety and genuine rest, begins to read itself, to process what it has been carrying, to do the slow, quiet, unglamorous work of integrating what has happened and making more room for what is coming. This happens mostly at night. This is part of what sleep is. Not just the restoration of cellular functions, not just the consolidation of memory, not just the repair of what has been worn down by the day's activity, but the body's ongoing conversation with its own history. The quiet work of digestion, not of food, but of experience. The body is very good at this. It has been doing it every night of your life. It is doing it right now, even as these words move through you, even as the stories settle into wherever stories settle, even as the muscles release and the breath deepens and the heart continues its faithful rhythm. The healing is already in progress. It doesn't need your direction. It doesn't need your monitoring. It only needs what you are giving it right now. The conditions, the stillness, the dark, the permission to stop performing and simply be, the absence of the managing self's insistence on being in charge of everything. In that absence, the body does its ancient work. Trust it. The ancient teachings about healing were never separate from the ancient teachings about sleep, because the healers of the Buddhist tradition understood that sleep was not the interruption of life. It was the part of life in which the deepest work happened, the part that couldn't happen while the managing self was awake and in control, because the managing self would inevitably try to manage it, would try to direct it and evaluate it and ensure it was happening correctly. The deepest healing requires the managing self to step aside, and the managing self steps aside most completely in sleep. This is the gift of the night. Not rest in the sense of absence, rest in the sense of a different kind of presence, the presence of the deeper processes that don't get a turn when the conscious mind is running the show. Tonight, the conscious mind is giving up its turn. The deeper processes are here. They know what they're doing. They have been waiting with the patience of things that know they will eventually get their turn for exactly this. Let them work. Let the healing happen. In the quiet of the night, in the stillness of the breath, in the particular darkness that is yours alone and that no one else is in right now, in exactly this way. One more story, a short one. A student asked a very old healer, "What is the most powerful medicine?" The healer was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Sleep." The student waited for more. There wasn't any more. Sleep, the healer meant, not as a simple thing. Sleep as the state in which the body does what it cannot do awake. Sleep as the condition in which the armor drops, the vigilance rests, the defenses let down enough for the deeper work to begin. Sleep as the original medicine, the one that was there before any other, the one that the body gives itself every night with more consistency and more wisdom than any external remedy can manage. You are about to take the most powerful medicine. You have been taking it every night of your life. Tonight, perhaps, with a little more trust, a little more willingness to give it the conditions it needs, the stillness, the darkness, the release of the managing self's grip on the night. The medicine is ready. The body knows what to do with it. You only need to swallow and let it work. Rest now. Every story tonight has been pointing here, to this moment, in this body, in this night, where the conditions for healing are present, where the armor can rest, where the body can do its ancient, faithful, extraordinary work. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to try anything. You don't need to be anything other than what you are right now. A living thing in the dark, breathing, carried, doing the profoundly ordinary and profoundly important thing of resting. The healing is already happening. In the quiet, in the dark, in you. Good night. There is a particular kind of night that comes after a long period of not being well. The kind of night where the body has been carrying something, illness, grief, exhaustion, the slow accumulation of more than it should have had to carry alone, and where the rest that comes is not ordinary rest, but something deeper, something that feels, even in sleep, like arriving somewhere you had been trying to reach for a long time. You may or may not be in that kind of night tonight, but something in the stories that came before, something in the quality of attending to healing, in the speaking directly to the wound, in the acknowledgement that healing is the direction of living things when conditions allow, may have shifted something, may have told some part of you, in the language that part understands, that the conditions are present, that it is safe tonight to let the deeper work begin. The armor is heavy. It has been doing its job, the job it was built for, which was protection in conditions that called for protection. That job is not being criticized. The armor served you. The vigilance served you. The careful management of what was allowed in and what was kept out served you. But there are nights when the armor can rest, when the threat it was built for is not present, when the conditions are finally safe enough that the body can exhale completely, all the way down, without holding anything in reserve. This is one of those nights. If it feels that way, and even if it doesn't feel that way yet, even if the armor is still in place, still monitoring, still not quite convinced, that is all right too. The armor has its own timeline. You cannot force it to lift any more than you can force a flower to open. You can only provide the conditions and wait. The conditions are here. The warmth, the dark, the quiet. The stories that came without demanding anything in return. The specific quality of this night, which is yours alone, which no one else is in, which exists only now and will never exist again in exactly this form. The conditions are here. The armor will lift when it lifts. And when it does, even briefly, even partially, what is underneath will do what it has always been trying to do. Find its way back to itself, to you, to the wholeness that has been here all along, beneath everything that covered it. You are going to be all right. Not because nothing difficult is happening, not because everything is resolved or on its way to resolution, but because the living thing that you are is oriented at its deepest toward health, toward continuation, toward the morning that comes after the night, and the day that comes after that, and the ongoing, imperfect, completely sufficient movement of a life forward through time. You are going to be all right. Rest now in that knowledge, in the dark that holds it, in the healing that is already happening. Good night. There are people who have lain in this kind of dark before you. Not your dark exactly. No one else's dark is exactly yours. But this kind, the dark, where the body is asking for more than sleep. The dark, where something is being worked through that the daytime doesn't have room for. The dark, where healing and rest and grief and restoration are all happening simultaneously in the quiet of a body that knows more than the mind that lives in it. All of those people moved through their nights. All of them arrived at mornings. Changed, most of them. Some profoundly. Some in ways they couldn't name, but arrived. You will arrive too. You have been arriving at mornings your entire life, through every night that was difficult, and every night that was ordinary, and every night that was something in between. The night is the same night it has always been. Your body is the same body, the one that has made this crossing every night, that knows the way, that has never once failed to bring you to the morning. Trust it tonight, the way you have trusted it every other night. Not consciously. You don't trust it consciously most nights. You simply sleep. But beneath the sleeping, something like trust operates, something that allows the releasing. Allow it tonight. The body knows the way. The healing knows its work. The night knows how to end. And in the morning, something will have moved. Quietly, in the dark, while you rested. As all healing moves. Good night.